The HOA president called 911 claiming I was illegally operating a business in my office space without permits. She demanded police arrest me for commercial violations in a residential zone. What she didn't know: I owned the entire office complex, the land underneath it, and the street she parked on. Before you watch full story, comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. My name is Marcus Williams, and I'm a 41-year-old software developer who built my company from scratch in my garage 12 years ago. What started as freelance web development had grown into Williams Tech Solutions, a firm with 23 employees and 7-figure annual revenue. 3 years ago, I made the biggest purchase of my life: Riverside Office Complex, a beautiful 4-building development with premium office suites, covered parking, and landscaped common areas. The complex sat on 12 acres of prime real estate in the fastest-growing business district in Austin. The purchase price was $4.2 million, financed through a combination of business profits, bank loans, and pure determination. I moved my company into the largest building and leased the remaining spaces to other small businesses: accountants, lawyers, marketing agencies, and consultants. Life was good. My company was thriving, my tenants were happy, and I was building long-term wealth through commercial real estate ownership. The complex was my pride and joy, representing everything I'd worked for since starting with nothing but a laptop and an idea. The trouble started when Melissa Parker moved into the residential neighborhood that bordered my office complex. Melissa, 48, a former city planning commissioner with an inflated sense of authority, immediately decided that my successful business park was somehow under her jurisdiction. Melissa's house sat across from the main entrance to Riverside Office Complex. Nice location, decent house, but apparently she'd bought it without realizing there was an active business district next door. Within 2 weeks of moving in, she was complaining about commercial traffic in her residential neighborhood. Never mind that the office complex predated her house by 15 years and was properly zoned for business use. Her first attack was noise complaints. She called the city claiming my tenants' air conditioning units violated noise ordinances. The inspector found all equipment well within legal limits and properly maintained. Next came parking complaints. Melissa claimed my tenants were parking on public streets instead of using the complex's private parking areas. A quick survey showed that 94% of complex parking was occupied by tenants and visitors, with only a few overflow vehicles using street parking that was completely legal. Then she escalated to zoning complaints. Melissa filed formal complaints claiming the office complex violated residential zoning requirements and needed to be shut down for community safety. The city planning department politely informed her that Riverside Office Complex was properly zoned for commercial use and had operated legally for over 15 years. All permits were current, all inspections passed, all regulations followed. But Melissa wasn't finished. She had bigger plans that would soon reveal the true depth of her delusion. One Tuesday morning, I arrived at my office to find official-looking notices posted on every building in the complex. The letterhead read Riverside Residential HOA, and claimed authority over all properties in the residential district. The notices demanded that all businesses cease operations immediately and convert their spaces to residential use within 60 days. Failure to comply would result in fines, legal action, and forced closure. I stared at the notices in complete confusion. Riverside Office Complex wasn't part of any residential district or HOA. It was a commercial property that I owned outright, sitting on land zoned for business use since 1987. The notices were signed by Melissa Parker, identifying herself as HOA President and Zoning Enforcement Officer. She'd apparently created an entire fictional HOA and appointed herself to run it. I called my property attorney, Janet Rodriguez, who'd handled the complex purchase and all legal matters. After reading the notices, she laughed so hard I thought she might need medical attention. "Marcus," she said, catching her breath, "this woman has no legal authority over your property. You can't just declare yourself president of an HOA that doesn't exist and start issuing orders to property owners." "So these notices are meaningless?" I asked. "Completely meaningless," Janet confirmed. "But we should document this harassment in case it escalates. People who create fictional authority often escalate to more serious illegal behavior." While I knew Melissa's HOA notices were worthless, my tenants didn't have that context. Within hours of the notices being posted, my phone was ringing constantly with panicked business owners demanding explanations. Sarah Chin from Chin and Associates Accounting was the first to call. "Marcus, what's this about converting to residential use? Our lease has 3 years remaining. Are we going to be forced out?" I spent the morning calling each tenant personally to explain that the notices were posted by a delusional neighbor with no legal authority. Melissa Parker is not an HOA president, I told everyone. She's a troubled neighbor who's apparently decided to play make-believe with other people's businesses. But the damage was spreading. Dr. Rodriguez from the dental practice reported that patients were canceling appointments after seeing the closure notices. 2 marketing agencies received calls from clients asking if they needed to find new service providers. The fictional HOA notices were creating real business disruption and financial losses for everyone in the complex. That afternoon, I posted official notices signed by me as the actual property owner, explaining that the HOA claims were false and that all businesses should continue normal operations. I also installed security cameras to catch whoever was posting unauthorized notices on my buildings. Wednesday morning brought a new round of escalation. Melissa had appointed herself HOA Legal Enforcement Director, and was now threatening to call police, fire departments, and city inspectors to force closure of the complex. Her latest notices claimed that operating businesses in a residential zone violated multiple city ordinances and that she had authority to order immediate shutdowns pending legal review. The notices were becoming more elaborate and official-looking. Melissa had apparently spent considerable time researching actual city codes and legal language to make her fictional authority sound legitimate. But she'd made a crucial mistake. The notices referenced specific city ordinances that applied only to residential properties. A quick check confirmed that none of those ordinances applied to commercially zoned business districts. I forwarded copies to Janet, who added them to our growing file of harassment documentation. "She's escalating from nuisance to potential criminal behavior," Janet warned. "Filing false official reports could result in charges." Thursday morning, I arrived to find Melissa standing in my parking lot with a clipboard, photographing license plates and writing violation notices to place on cars. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her. "You're on private property without permission." "I'm conducting official HOA enforcement activities," she replied without looking up. "These vehicles are illegally parked in residential areas." "Ma'am, this is a commercial parking lot that I own. You have no authority here." Melissa finally looked at me with the kind of condescending smile that immediately raised my blood pressure. "Sir, I'm the elected HOA president for this residential district. I have full authority to enforce community standards and zoning compliance." "What HOA?" I asked. "What residential district?" "This is Riverside Office Complex, which I own and operate as a commercial property." "That's what you think," she said, walking toward her car. "You'll be hearing from our legal department very soon." Friday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. I was in my office reviewing quarterly financial reports when I heard sirens approaching the complex. 2 police cars and a fire truck pulled into the parking lot with lights flashing. I walked outside to find Melissa talking animatedly with Officer Thompson, pointing at my building and waving what appeared to be official documents. "That's him," she said when she saw me. "The person illegally operating commercial businesses in a residential zone without proper permits." Officer Thompson approached me with a professional but slightly confused expression. "Sir, we received a report that you're operating an illegal business in a residential area. The complainant says she's the HOA president and has authority to order your closure." "Officer," I said, pulling out my phone, "I own this entire office complex. It's properly zoned for commercial use, fully permitted, and has operated legally for 15 years. This woman has no authority over my property." I showed him photos of the complex's zoning documentation, business licenses, and property ownership records that I'd started keeping on my phone for exactly this situation. Melissa stepped forward with her clipboard. "Officer, I have documentation showing this property is part of Riverside Residential District and subject to HOA governance. These businesses are operating illegally and need to be shut down immediately." Officer Thompson examined Melissa's documents, which appeared to be printouts from various websites with her own handwritten additions claiming HOA authority. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "these documents don't show any legal authority over commercial property. Do you have official HOA registration documents or legal authority to enforce zoning requirements?" "I'm the elected HOA president," Melissa insisted. "I have full authority to protect our residential community from illegal commercial activities." That's when I realized the full extent of her delusion. Melissa actually believed she had legal authority over my property. Officer Thompson called for backup and requested a supervisor to help sort through the conflicting claims about property ownership and authority. While we waited, I gathered comprehensive documentation to prove my ownership and authority. I showed the officers my property deed, business licenses, zoning certificates, insurance policies, and tax records. Everything clearly established that I owned Riverside Office Complex and operated it as a legal commercial property. Melissa produced a folder of documents that she claimed proved her HOA authority. Under scrutiny, her evidence consisted of printouts from city websites about HOA governance, generic information, hand-drawn maps showing arbitrary residential district boundaries, self-created letterhead claiming official HOA status, a list of violations written in her own handwriting, photos of office workers she claimed were trespassing in residential areas. Sergeant Martinez arrived and quickly assessed the situation. After reviewing all documentation, he took Melissa aside for a private conversation about filing false police reports and harassment. "Ma'am," I heard him say, "you've called 911 to report illegal business activity that doesn't exist. You've claimed authority you don't possess. This could constitute filing false reports, which is a criminal offense." Melissa's response revealed the depth of her delusion. "Sergeant, I'm trying to protect our community from commercial invasion. These people are destroying our residential character and property values. Ma'am, this has been a commercial district since before you moved here. You don't have any authority over these businesses." As police sorted through the situation, my tenants began gathering in the parking lot to watch the drama unfold. Several offered to provide statements about Melissa's harassment campaign. Dr. Rodriguez revealed that Melissa had been calling his dental practice claiming to be a zoning enforcement officer, and demanding they cease operations immediately. Sarah Chin showed officers printed emails where Melissa threatened to pursue criminal charges against any business that continued operating in her residential district. The marketing agency owners reported that Melissa had been photographing their clients and employees, claiming she was documenting illegal commercial activity for law enforcement. Most disturbing, Melissa had been contacting my tenants' customers and clients, warning them that the businesses were under investigation for zoning violations, and might be shut down without notice. The harassment campaign was systematic and designed to destroy my tenants' businesses through fear and misinformation. Sergeant Martinez gathered statements from multiple business owners documenting months of harassment, false claims of authority, and threats of legal action based on Melissa's fictional HOA powers. Based on the evidence and witness statements, Sergeant Martinez arrested Melissa for filing false police reports, harassment, and interfering with business operations. As they placed her in handcuffs, Melissa continued insisting that she was the victim of a conspiracy by illegal businesses operating in her residential neighborhood. "You're making a mistake," she told the officers. "I'm the elected HOA president. I have authority to enforce community standards. These people are the criminals." Her complete detachment from reality was both disturbing and pathetic. Melissa genuinely believed she had legal authority to shut down businesses that had operated legally for decades. Monday morning brought additional legal consequences. The district attorney's office filed formal charges against Melissa for filing false police reports, misdemeanor; criminal harassment, misdemeanor; interference with business operations, misdemeanor; impersonating a public official, felony. The felony charge was based on her claims of being a zoning enforcement officer, with authority to order business closures. Impersonating government officials is taken seriously by prosecutors. Janet filed civil lawsuits against Melissa for a harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress, a business interference and lost profits, defamation for false claims about illegal operations, trespassing on private property. The civil suits sought damages for lost business revenue, legal fees, and compensation for the stress and disruption caused by her harassment campaign. As legal proceedings moved forward, we discovered that Melissa's fictional HOA scheme was more elaborate than initially realized. She'd been planning her takeover of the office complex for months before taking action. Her computer, seized during the investigation, contained detailed plans for converting the office buildings to residential condominiums. She'd researched property values, contacted contractors about conversion costs, and even created marketing materials for Riverside Residential Village. Melissa had apparently convinced herself that she could force out the existing businesses, claim authority over the property, and somehow convert the commercial complex to residential use for her own profit. Her financial records showed she'd borrowed $15,000 against her house to fund what she called HOA establishment and enforcement activities. The money had been spent on legal research, document printing, and consultation with attorneys about property conversion regulations. Most disturbing, Melissa had been in contact with a real estate developer about upcoming residential conversion opportunities in our area. She'd promised to deliver a fully converted residential complex within 6 months. The investigation revealed that Melissa's harassment wasn't just delusional behavior. It was a criminal scheme to steal commercial property for residential development profit. Word of Melissa's arrest and the revelation of her property theft scheme spread quickly through both the office complex and surrounding residential neighborhood. My tenants were relieved to learn that the harassment would finally stop, but several reported lasting business damage from Melissa's interference. 3 companies had lost major clients who'd been spooked by her claims of impending closure. The dental practice estimated $12,000 in lost revenue from canceled appointments. The marketing agencies reported $8,500 in contract cancellations from clients who'd been told the businesses were under investigation. Even my own company had suffered. 2 potential clients had postponed projects after Melissa contacted them claiming Williams Tech Solutions was operating illegally and might be shut down. The financial damages from her harassment campaign totaled over $35,000 across all affected businesses. Surprisingly, the residential neighbors were overwhelmingly supportive once they learned the truth about Melissa's scheme. Most had been concerned about her erratic behavior and extreme claims about property authority. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door to Melissa, revealed that she'd been pressured to join the fictional HOA and contribute money for legal enforcement activities. "I thought it was strange that she was asking for money," Mrs. Patterson said. "Real HOAs collect fees through established procedures, not door-to-door solicitation." 3 other neighbors reported similar solicitation attempts where Melissa claimed they needed to pay HOA dues to support her campaign against illegal commercial activities. Melissa's criminal trial began 6 months after her arrest. She'd refused plea bargain offers and maintained her innocence, claiming she was being persecuted for protecting residential property values. Her defense attorney tried to argue that Melissa genuinely believed she had authority to enforce zoning requirements and wasn't intentionally filing false reports. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Melissa's systematic harassment campaign and deliberate creation of fictional authority to support her property theft scheme. Key evidence included computer files showing detailed conversion plans, financial records of money borrowed for the scheme, recorded conversations with developers about property opportunities, or witness testimony from multiple harassment victims, a documentation of false claims made to police and city officials. The trial lasted 4 days. Melissa testified in her own defense, which was a mistake that sealed her conviction. Under cross-examination, she continued claiming authority over my property and insisting that the office complex was operating illegally in a residential zone. "The property is clearly residential," she testified. "Anyone can see that office buildings don't belong in a neighborhood setting." The prosecutor's response was devastating. "Ms. Parker, are you aware that Riverside Office Complex has operated legally as a commercial property since 1987, 15 years before you moved to the area?" "That doesn't matter," Melissa replied. "Residential property values take precedence over commercial profits." Her complete inability to acknowledge reality convinced the jury that her actions were deliberate rather than mistaken. The jury found Melissa guilty on all charges after 3 hours of deliberation. Judge Patricia Hernandez sentenced her to 18 months probation for the misdemeanor charges, 2 years in state prison for impersonating a public official, $25,000 in fines and court costs, complete restitution for business damages, permanent restraining order from the office complex. Judge Hernandez was particularly harsh about the impersonation charge. "Ms. Parker, you created fictional authority and used it to harass legitimate businesses. This strikes at the foundation of legal authority that our society depends upon." The civil lawsuits settled for $47,000 in damages plus attorney fees. Melissa's house was placed in foreclosure to satisfy the judgment, and her wages were garnished for ongoing restitution payments. Most importantly, the restraining order prohibited her from contacting my tenants, visiting the office complex, or making any claims about authority over commercial properties. With Melissa in prison and legal protection in place, Riverside Office Complex began recovering from the harassment campaign. Several businesses that had lost clients were able to rebuild relationships by explaining the resolution of the false harassment claims. I invested in additional security measures including upgraded cameras, improved lighting, and a gate system that provided controlled access during evening hours. The improvements enhanced the professional atmosphere and gave tenants additional peace of mind. The incident had actually strengthened relationships within the office community. Businesses that had barely interacted before were now collaborating on security, referring clients to each other, and organizing social events. We established a tenant association that met monthly to discuss complex improvements, security concerns, and business development opportunities. The shared experience of surviving Melissa's harassment had created lasting bonds. Property values in the area increased as word spread about the professional management and strong business community at Riverside Office Complex. The successful resolution of the harassment situation actually enhanced our reputation. The experience taught valuable lessons about property management, legal protection, and community relations that helped improve operations at the complex. I worked with Janet to establish clear protocols for responding to harassment or false claims of authority. We created a documentation system that would make any future legal action quick and decisive. The tenant association developed security protocols including shared contact information, incident reporting procedures, and group response strategies for any future harassment attempts. We also improved community relations with the residential neighborhood through quarterly meetings, landscape improvements, and traffic management that addressed legitimate concerns about commercial operations near homes. Most importantly, I learned the value of maintaining comprehensive legal documentation readily accessible on my phone. Having ownership records, zoning certificates, and business licenses immediately available had been crucial during the police response. The experience also demonstrated the importance of strong relationships with tenants and neighbors. The community support during Melissa's harassment had been invaluable for both emotional and practical reasons. 2 years after Melissa's conviction, Riverside Office Complex was thriving beyond my original expectations. The successful resolution of the harassment situation had actually enhanced our reputation and attracted new tenants. I purchased an adjacent 2-acre lot and built a 5th building specifically designed for tech startups and creative businesses. The new building featured flexible spaces, high-speed internet infrastructure, and modern amenities that attracted young entrepreneurs. The complex now housed 37 businesses with a waiting list for available spaces. Monthly rental income had increased 34% since before Melissa's harassment campaign began. Several tenants had expanded their operations within the complex rather than moving to different locations. The strong business community and professional management made Riverside Office Complex their preferred long-term location. I also started consulting with other commercial property owners about harassment prevention and legal protection strategies. The expertise gained from surviving Melissa's attack helped other landlords protect their investments and tenants. The experience of fighting for my property rights led to broader involvement in commercial property advocacy and small business protection initiatives. I joined the Austin Commercial Property Owners Association and eventually became president of the organization. The position allowed me to help other property owners facing similar harassment and legal challenges. We lobbied for stronger penalties for filing false police reports against businesses and improved procedures for documenting commercial property rights. Several legislative changes resulted from our advocacy efforts. I also started speaking at small business conferences about legal protection and community relations. The story of surviving Melissa's harassment inspired other entrepreneurs facing adversity. The consulting business evolved into a formal property management company that specialized in protecting commercial properties from harassment and false authority claims. Beyond the business success, the experience had profound personal impacts that changed my perspective on property ownership, community responsibility, and standing up for principles. The stress of fighting Melissa's harassment had initially been overwhelming, but successfully defending my property rights built confidence that carried over into other areas of life and business. I met my future wife Sarah during the trial proceedings. She was a court reporter who admired my determination to fight back against harassment rather than surrendering to false authority. We married 2 years later in a ceremony held at the office complex, with many of my tenants and their families attending. The property that had been under attack became the foundation for our new family. Our first child was born 3 years after Melissa's conviction. The nursery was decorated with photos of the office complex and framed copies of the property deeds, symbols of the home and business we'd fought to protect. Melissa was released from prison after serving 18 months of her 2-year sentence. The parole conditions included prohibitions on contacting any previous harassment victims and restrictions on making claims about property authority. She moved to another state and found work in retail under supervision by parole officers who monitored her activities. The criminal conviction made it impossible for her to obtain housing near commercial properties or employment involving authority over others. Her house had been sold during foreclosure proceedings to satisfy the civil judgment. The new owners were a young family who appreciated the proximity to the office complex and the professional atmosphere of the neighborhood. Melissa's LinkedIn profile listed her as a retail associate, without mentioning her previous claims of being an HOA president or zoning enforcement officer. The criminal conviction had effectively ended any possibility of returning to property-related activities. Most importantly, she showed no signs of attempting similar schemes in her new location. The prison sentence and financial consequences appeared to have finally convinced her that fictional authority claims were not profitable ventures. 5 years after Melissa's initial harassment campaign, Riverside Office Complex had become a model commercial property known for professional management, strong tenant relationships, and effective security measures. The complex won the Austin Commercial Property Association's Excellence in Management Award for 3 consecutive years. The recognition attracted additional investment opportunities and consulting contracts. My property management company had expanded to oversee 12 commercial properties across Central Texas. The expertise gained from defending against harassment had become valuable professional knowledge that protected numerous business communities. The legislative changes we'd advocated for had been adopted in 8 other states, creating stronger protections for commercial property owners facing harassment and false authority claims. Most satisfying was the transformation of the office complex from a target of harassment into a thriving business community that supported over 200 jobs and generated millions in annual economic activity. Looking back on the experience, the most important lesson was that property ownership means nothing without the willingness to defend your rights against people who would steal what you've worked to build. Melissa had advantages I didn't initially recognize: the element of surprise, official-looking documentation, and the willingness to lie convincingly to authority figures. But truth, proper documentation, and persistence ultimately prevailed over criminal deception. The financial cost of fighting back was significant, over $23,000 in legal fees and lost business revenue. But the cost of not fighting would have been everything: my property, my tenants' livelihoods, and the future of my business. The community support that emerged during the crisis proved that most people want to support legitimate businesses against harassment and false authority. Melissa's manipulation had worked temporarily, but honest relationships proved stronger than criminal schemes. My advice to anyone facing property harassment or false authority claims is straightforward. Document everything immediately, get professional legal help quickly, and never surrender what's rightfully yours to people with fictional power. The justice system works when property owners have the courage to stand up for their rights and the documentation to prove their ownership. Criminal schemes depend on victims being too intimidated or confused to fight back effectively. Melissa thought she could steal my property and destroy my business through fake authority and systematic harassment. Instead, she ended up in prison while my business grew stronger than ever before. Sometimes the best response to someone claiming authority over your property is proving that real authority comes from legitimate ownership, proper documentation, and the determination to defend what you've built. Property protected, business expanded, community strengthened, and justice served. Drop your own property harassment or fake authority story in the comments below. Have you ever had to defend your business against fictional HOA claims? Hit that subscribe button if you love stories where real property owners defeat fake authorities. Next week, how I caught my business partner embezzling company funds and used the evidence to buy out his shares for pennies on the dollar.